I want to turn at this moment to another voice because there's Washington, which is just waking up in a way to the news of Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, having been assassinated. Daniel Silverberg is joining me. He's former foreign policy advisor to the House Democratic leadership and foreign policy analyst. Appreciate your joining us there, Mr. Silverberg. How are you making out the events of the last 24 hours? Does this, you believe, increase the American resolve to go on with a prolonged war for regime change? Or do you believe, having achieved the assassination or having resulted in the assassination of Khamenei, the Americans will wait and watch to see what happens next? Or do you expect them to go even harder at the Iranians now?
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. I think it is difficult to assess at this point something called American resolve, because there is no moment of unity that has happened in the past in Washington. If you think about previous moments, particularly after 9/11, when the US was attacked and members of Congress joined together, regardless of their views of the use of force, they said, God bless our troops who are in harm's way. We are going to stand behind the president at the moment and then have a debate in due time and due oversight. That is not happening here. What is happening, primarily on the Democratic side, but a little bit on the Republican side as well, is members of Congress coming out and saying this was a war of choice. This violated the War Powers Resolution, which on paper requires the president to come to Congress to ask permission. And we want a vote immediately to debate this. So I think it's tough to opine on American
but I take your, but Mr. Silverberg, I take your point, Mr. Silverberg, but as we've seen both in June, when the US targeted Iranian nuclear facilities, and now here in the month of March, Donald Trump doesn't seem to really care whether Congress gives him permission or not. I mean, Donald Trump seems to take these unilateral decisions. So will anything really change, given that Trump seems determined to effect some kind of a regime change along with the Israelis?
Well, I think you're asking the right question then, not so much about American resolve, but what does President Trump decide to do? And oftentimes President Trump has acted in ways that might be inconsistent with even what his own MAGA base wants. And in this instance, my sense is President Trump does have resolve to continue the fight here. There has almost been no precedent of regime change being successful from the air. And that, frankly, disturbs, is a point of concern for a lot of military analysts who are watching a disconnect between President Trump's goals of removing this regime and the means by which to do it. At a certain point, there could be a need for forces on the ground. But in terms of President Trump's willingness to continue this campaign, he's made clear we're only 48 hours into this and that there are going to be multiple components to it. And in some ways, how he responds is going to be calibrated based on what the Iranians do. The fact that there was just a missile that got through Israel in Beit Shemesh will, I think, impact President Trump's calculus of how hard he pushes further against the Iranians.
Are you very clear? Is there any possibility of those ground operations, or do you believe that President Trump would like this to, any uprising against the regime will have to be internal? Will the Americans agree to a ground operation, or will Trump sanction a ground operation in your view? A quick answer, sir.
I don't think so for the time being. I think President Trump is doing everything he can to set the table for the Iranians to find a new leader. And you're already seeing that politicking taking place. There was an extraordinary article in The Atlantic over the weekend with former President Ahmadinejad emerging as the one saying, I can be the Delcy Rodriguez, the Venezuelan vice president who works with the US. I can be that character in Iran. So I think President Trump is likely hoping not to cross that red line of sending in ground troops unless the table has so been set that it is safe for American forces to get on the ground. But I don't think anyone wants that to happen.
Okay. Daniel Silverberg, for joining me there from Washington so early in the morning in your country. I appreciate you joining me on the show today.